Frankie wrote in saying, if you were able to choose the sex of your offspring, would you? We've talked before about whether this is going to be something that is readily available to parents at some point in the future. I think, just to get it out of the way, that it absolutely will be readily available and sort of relatively affordable. I don't know exactly when it will be how affordable, but I think that this, within, I don't know, some reasonable number of years, is going to be pretty affordable. What do you think about that, just on the science of it?
Affordability, I think it would be relatively affordable. I mean, as long as it's available to the general public, I think so, yeah.
Okay, so I think we have no disagreement about whether the technology will allow for this. Given that, would we want to choose the sex of offspring? I'm sort of leaning towards, as someone who doesn't have kids, I'm leaning towards no. If I were to have a kid, as former producer Lewis once said, if I accidentally had a kid, I'd probably love the kid. If I deliberately had a kid, I'd probably love the kid. That's not really an issue, and I think that gender would play no role in that. However, I do have friends who continued having children because they had one girl, two girls. They were hoping to have a boy and just kind of be done with it because they wanted kids of both sexes. They had a third girl, and thus they continued having kids beyond when they otherwise might have because they were seeking that elusive boy. I think in those situations, maybe it's perfectly reasonable to choose the sex of your offspring. And from a population control aspect, if you want a boy and a girl, you have a girl, you get pregnant, you choose a boy, you're now done, and you have two kids that you're bringing into the world, rather than maybe having to have 3, 4, or 5 kids before you get that boy.
And then you have to claim afterwards that you love all the kids equally.
Of course.
I mean, I kind of have the same answer, where I wouldn't want to choose the sex of the child for the first child,
Okay.
but maybe if I had a boy the first time around, I would want to have a girl afterwards.
Right.
But you start to get into this slippery slope, because if you can choose the sex of the baby, or other things kind of up for grabs, like can you choose the height or eye color, some of these other things that are just physical attributes?
Well, very often when we have this conversation, at some point the idea of something that feels like eugenics gets brought up, which is, okay, well, listen, you're going to choose sex, and if you could also, quote, fix or modify certain genetic predispositions to diseases, what about physical attributes? What about eye color? What about intelligence trait predisposition? How far are you going to go? And we actually interviewed NYU professor and New York Times ethicist Arthur Kaplan about this issue. And he had a pretty specific way, which is you're allowed to modify traits depending on whether or not they'd be passed down genetically to the next offspring generation. And that would be a way to think about what types of genetic modifications could be made ethically, in his view, or not. So there are sort of objective ways where we could prevent such a slippery slope.
So what does that mean? Like you can't be superhuman in any way, but if the genes kind of already exist in the parents, then you can select which ones get passed down to the next generation?
Yes, more or less. More or less,
Okay.
that's the idea. So I think that that's a problem that could be solved. But if I were able to choose the sex of my offspring, would I? Probably not, except in the situation I mentioned, where if I had some. Now, you could also argue why are parents so determined to have children of a certain sex? And is that even a legitimate desire? Many people would say yes, some people would say no.
I think it's just the idea of the typical American family where
Right.
you have a mom and a dad, a boy and a girl, and
Yep.
maybe a third of a dog, I guess.
Right, yeah. Someone recently wrote something saying they have 3.5 kids, and I had no clue what that meant. And I think maybe the 0.5 refers to a dog. That how some people
Oh,
are
I don't
talking-
know. I was just thinking of the nuclear family and how
Yeah,
you think of
like
how
the
that breaks down.
average. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Okay, that's my view on that.